Have you ever considered the immense ecological power held within a simple native plant? These species are not just pretty additions to our landscapes, they are the very architects of biodiversity. Absolutely. It's fascinating how plants that evolved alongside local wildlife over thousands of years are uniquely adapted to support a thriving ecosystem. They truly are the cornerstones of a resilient garden. Precisely. Unlike introduced species, native flora forms the foundation for soil health, efficient water cycles, and vital food webs. Their deep root systems are crucial for preventing erosion, and their role in carbon sequestration is incredibly significant, indirectly contributing to global climate regulation. Plus, they require far less water and maintenance, making them inherently sustainable choices for our gardens. Beyond their ecological functions, native beauties offer a dynamic aesthetic. Instead of a static painting, a native garden becomes a living film, constantly shifting with the seasons and local life. The constant motion of plants in the wind and the frenetic activity of the wildlife they attract create an immersive experience. It's about embracing a garden that evolves, thrives, and connects us more deeply to nature. So, coming back to our discussion, we've established natives are the architects. How do we clearly delineate what native actually means versus these other categories like non-native or invasive? That's a critical distinction. Fundamentally, native plants are those species that occur naturally in a region, meaning they've evolved right there without any human ever lugging them in from somewhere else. Right. They've adapted over millennia to the specific climate, soil chemistry, and wildlife pressures of that exact location. That deep coevolution is what gives them their advantage. Then you have non-native or exotic plants, species introduced from entirely different geographic areas, sometimes accidentally, sometimes deliberately, for ornamental reasons. The key threshold, however, is the invasive species. These are non-natives that actively cause economic, environmental, or human health harm by aggressively outcompeting the established natives. Exactly. Invasive species disrupt those intricate food webs we mentioned earlier, essentially dismantling the ecological structure the natives painstakingly built up over time. And this brings us to the core ecological functions. Let's focus first on the ground beneath our feet, soil health. How exactly do native roots improve the ground structure? Think of their deep, varied root systems as structural rebar for the earth itself. They physically bind the soil, which drastically cuts down on erosion during heavy rains. And that process isn't just about structure. It actively pulls organic matter deeper into the ground, which enhances nutrient cycling and improves water retention significantly. It's incredible when you realize they are improving the ground quality from the interior up through processes like soil sequestration. This contrasts sharply with shallow-rooted ornamentals. Precisely. They generally require little to no supplemental watering, making them incredibly drought tolerant. Their efficient root structures also increase water infiltration, reducing damaging surface runoff. That ties directly into one of the big questions then. Planting a native wildflower garden is often described as providing maximum ecological impact for minimal long-term effort and resources. Which resource saving is specifically mentioned? The primary resource saving mentioned is water. Less supplemental irrigation means lower utility bills and less strain on local water tables during dry spells. That's a tangible benefit for the homeowner. But what about the non-visual benefit that connects a small native garden to global health? That would be their contribution to carbon sequestration. The extensive and diverse root depths are key for rapid, efficient carbon capture, which aids global climate regulation. So, in essence, even a small patch of natives is acting as a minor carbon sink. It's amazing that plants evolved locally can have such a macroeconomic impact. Indeed, and this biological foundation directly leads to higher biodiversity support. Native plants are the necessary food source and shelter for local fauna. They offer the specialized food, shelter, and breeding grounds for everything from specific solitary bees to migratory birds. This specialization creates a stable, resilient food web. Because the food web relies on those co-evolved connections, the ecosystem becomes much more buffered against unexpected issues like pest outbreaks or minor climate fluctuations. Okay, let's switch to the visual side now, because people often think native landscapes look messy or unkempt. The aesthetic appeal of native wildflower gardens is characterized by a dynamic combination of color and motion, which is something static flower beds just can't replicate. That's a great way to put it. Rather than a static painting, it's described as a living film. Can you elaborate on what creates that motion element? The motion comes from the plants reacting to the environment. The way they dance in the wind, the sequential timing of their flowering, and the gradual movement into their seeding stages. So match the dynamic element of a native garden to its resulting benefit. The motion itself creates engagement, right? Yes. The inherent motion, combined with the constant change through flowering and seeding, results in continuous seasonal interest, ensuring the garden is always visually engaging. And that visual dynamism is compounded by the frenetic activity of the wildlife they attract, which adds an auditory and behavioral layer to the garden experience. It turns a visually pleasing space into a deeply immersive, rich experience. It's about embracing that evolution rather than fighting it with harsh, non-adapted landscaping. One final check on the basics. Which term defines a plant naturally adapted to the specific local environment where it evolved? That would be native plant. They are the benchmark against which we measure ecological health in any given region. And going back to the mission objective, what mission objective defines the ideal native garden according to our discussion? The ideal objective seems to be cultivating a self-sustaining, resilient ecosystem that maximizes ecological support while minimizing long-term human intervention and resource input. That encapsulates it perfectly. We discussed soil structure, water efficiency, carbon capture, and superior biodiversity support. And we contrasted that with the aesthetic reward, a dynamic living tapestry that changes vividly across the seasons, rather than a fixed, static arrangement. It's clear that choosing natives isn't just an act of gardening. It's an act of ecological restoration on a micro scale. It is truly fascinating how much impact those localized evolutionary partnerships have when allowed to flourish in our yards and landscapes. We covered the definitions of native, non-native, and invasives, emphasized the structural roles in soil and water, and appreciated the dynamic visuals. It highlights that resilience, from the ground structure up to complex food webs, is directly correlated to respecting that deep history of adaptation. The main takeaway should be that these plants aren't just filling space. They are doing essential system maintenance whether we see it or not. Absolutely. They are the original, most highly optimized technology for managing the local environment sustainably. I think we've covered the fundamental role of native plants in building those healthy, thriving ecosystems thoroughly today. It's been a great deep dive into appreciating these cornerstones of our natural world. It certainly changes how I look at any patch of green space now. Me too. Next time, we'll have to look at specific regional native superstores and their specialized relationships. That sounds like a perfect follow-up. Thanks for exploring the native advantage with me today. Thank you as well. Understanding the why behind native planting makes the how so much more rewarding. Indeed, we've seen that natives provide foundational physical health through soil and water management alongside incredible dynamic beauty. And they connect a small garden plot directly to global issues like carbon sequestration, which is a powerful thought to leave with our listeners. So, to wrap up, remember that a native garden is less about decoration and more about active ecological partnership. Exactly. Let's encourage everyone to look up which plants truly belong in their own unique patch of earth. That's where the real resilience begins. Well, that wraps up our look at the defining characteristics and incredible benefits of native flora. Have a wonderful, ecologically connected day. Thanks for joining us as we explored why the native advantage is the key to a thriving, low maintenance, and beautiful landscape. Goodbye for now.